roasted or judged or ridiculed. Well, the place where you can do that is right here, everybody. Oi, oi, oi. All right, looks like we're good. Let's see if we got anything going on here. Shinbiz says, do you think another BLM type Summer of Love is coming? I don't. I advocate for all types of, individual political power. So whether that be protesting, striking, boycotting, putting political pressure on your representatives, I'm for all of that. And I am against all sorts of violence or property damage and stuff like that. So, I know that the FBI blamed a lot of the damage of the BLM riots onto right-wing agitators, and I know that is not common knowledge. People still blame the Black Lives Matter protests for all those damages, and so it can be sometimes difficult to talk about because you're not really sure if the person that you are speaking to is aware of how universally peaceful and positive the Black Lives Matter protests were. Let's see here. Who was the best president in the last 100 years? I don't know. I think I'm much more comfortable talking about who was a great president in the last 50 years, and I like Obama and I like Biden. Let's see here. Patches and Pins, thoughts on anarchism? I'm not for it. The more chaos there is, the more marginalized and poor people get hurt. Let's see here. All right, Tom says, I marched with BLM in Miramar, Florida. 4,000 of us, no violence. BLM was worldwide. Agree. Let's see here. Chrismax says, makeup or filter? I forget if I have a filter on this thing. It's probably a filter. I'm not wearing makeup. Let's see here. Mike Singh says, sick of hearing about politics. Well, you don't have to be here, Mike. Alrighty. Scrolling down to the bottom here. There is no political solution to a troubled evolution. What a weird thing to say. Let's see here. Dan Black wrote, I wouldn't necessarily Carter, but he deserves more consideration than he's given. I completely agree with that. I need to read into the Carter administration because everything that I've seen about him, he seems like a really cool guy to me. The fact that he was so universally, decried as a bad president gives me pause. Let's see here. How do you feel about libertarianism? Asked Justin. So I have never subscribed to libertarianism. I find it to be pretty myopic perspective politically. We need the government to protect us from the powerful and the rich. And the libertarian philosophy basically just says, let the rich people become the new aristocrats and the working class become the new serfs. That was my feeling before I read a book called Dark Money by Jane Mayer, and regulars to the stream will know that I will not stop talking about that book because it basically outlines how the libertarian movement is basically astroturfed by the billionaire class because libertarianism is in their best interests. So it is kind of shocking how libertarianism is really just an astroturfed movement for the billionaire class to convince you to vote for right-wing politicians. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Let's see here. I'm just wondering because I don't know how people can support him. I'm keeping an open mind. Mutt101 says, thoughts on Hassan Piker? I don't know his stuff all that well. I don't agree with a lot of the things that I've heard him say, but I'm also for people being more interested and activated in politics, and I feel like Hassan does that. He's got such a massive following. He's not bad to look at, so I would say he's a net positive. Let's see here. Rowan says, how do you feel about the RFK Jr. Autism Registry? I find RFK Jr. to be one of the most sus individuals that I've ever seen. Thank you for the cool glasses. I find him to be extremely sus, and I know many instances that he has said things that are 100% false and that he knows to be false, so he's a fucking liar in addition. I know that people have been making analogous comparisons to that and the kind of like disability lists and disability registry that happened during the 1930s in Germany. And, I'm not willing to go that far necessarily, but I think that it is a pretty interesting comparison when you think about it. It seems unnecessary. Like, what he's doing to try to quote-unquote cure autism doesn't seem like it's actually going to do anything. And everybody who studies this and works with people who have autism will tell you that he has no idea what he's doing, that what he's doing isn't going to help. So it's like, why are we putting up with this fucking charade that he's actually going to accomplish anything in his job? There's a fucking tuberculosis outbreak happening, there's a fucking measles outbreak happening, there's fucking bird flu happening, there's fucking whooping cough is coming back, and thankfully we have somebody in charge of Health and Human Services who doesn't believe that vaccines work. So you tell me, guys, like, does it seem to be working, what he's doing? Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom. Southern Nana says companies such as Nike are moving out of China. China will lower tariffs. I don't know what that's in reference to. Craig says, are you glad that he got rid of 6 carcinogenic dyes off the market? I do not believe that he had anything to do with that. The FDA did that. The FDA has been studying these dyes for a long time, and if they have decided to finally pull the trigger on removing them, I say fucking great, man. But yeah, he wasn't the one who was in there banging his fist being like, we're banning these dyes, goddammit. And the FDA was like, but we get so much money from these companies. And he's like, I've had it up to here with corruption. I don't fucking trust that dude one tick. I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. He's a fucking con man and a liar. Let's see here. DJ D Main says, do you think birthright citizenship is at risk? So that's an interesting question. Birthright citizenship is in the Constitution. It is clear. It is obvious. It is part of the Constitution. Now, does that mean that the Republican Congress and the extremely right-wing Supreme Court are going to uphold the Constitution, or will they just go along with what Trump says? That still is an open question. But I think that the important thing is for people to realize that even if they can't do it, they're going to try. The Republican Party is going to try. And that should be concerning to you, that all of the rights that we have enshrined in the Constitution are at risk because the Republican Party wants to get rid of them, because Trump wants to get rid of them, because Elon Musk wants to get rid of them. Think about that when you think about voting going forward. Think about that when you think about your political activism going forward. Chris Jonas, good to see you again. Hey, got a question. Does Trump know that he ruins the U.S.? There's a number of theories surrounding that. I personally subscribe to the idea that he wants there to be chaos. He wants America to be weaker, because when we are weaker and when we are scared and when we are desperate, then he will have more leeway to do whatever he wants, because we will have less ability to do things like protest and boycott and strike and vote and form political action groups and things like that. I think he probably has a deal with Putin maybe to substantially weaken America economically, militarily, what have you. So yeah, the billionaire class does great when we are struggling. It gives them more power. Let's see here. Fall of Crown says, do you believe that the Democratic Party should become more moderate or radical? Well, I don't really know what those words mean, my man, because it really seems to be there are people who view the moderate wing as being like old and, out of touch. And there are some people who view the progressive wing as being extremists. I don't think that the Democratic Party necessarily needs to move in either direction. The Democratic Party is, in essence, a big tent. So we should represent a variety of political opinions from the center left to the far left, the same way that we represent a rainbow coalition of people of all different types of gender and sexual orientation and religion and race and age, etc. Brady Lusk 7 says, tell me one good thing Democrats did for middle class from 2024 besides making them poorer. Well, they didn't make them poorer, Brady Lusk. You want one good thing the Democrats did? I'll give you 5. The largest investment in green energy in our nation's history was creating boatloads of safe, good-paying, clean energy jobs in small towns that otherwise would have been dying. They were being revitalized. He lowered medical costs. He lowered health insurance premium costs. kept the price of insulin and asthma inhalers. The NLRB was pro-union and was working on the side of unions for the first time in decades. The FTC was breaking up monopolies. Let's see here. $170 billion in student loan debt canceled. That's just 5 off the top of my head, but I can do more if you need, Brad. All right. Kevin Van Pelt says, I think you are part of the reason the education... Brady Lusk says, I don't know, one person didn't become poorer under Biden. Well, was that Biden's fault, Brady Lusk? Because I think that was Trump's fault. And I have a pretty convincing argument for it, Brady Lusk, if you were interested in hearing it. Yorkie says, only thing Democrats did was double inflation. Again, that was Trump who did that. Just because something happens under the Democratic administration doesn't mean that it was caused by Democrats. Craig R. says, it's always Trump's fault. Not everything is Trump's fault, but just that is. Bake Boss says, can't afford a home. Well, blame Trump, guys, because he fucking did that. Tucker Cassidy says, isn't that great? I love being able to list Biden's successes. Yeah, me too, man. And that's the tip of the iceberg. I got more in my back pocket. Let's see here. Craig R. says, we have to pay for other people's loans. That is not how student loan forgiveness works. DJ Main says, access to FMLA for men for paternity leave after their partners have a child. I feel like you're saying the thing I think you're saying, but that's not important. Southern Anna says, how was that Trump's fault? Okay, so now that we have a bunch of people who are interested in hearing why the cost of living crisis is the fault of Republicans and Donald Trump, I will do that rant for you now. So listen up, everybody. Listen up. This is all the reasons. Okay, so Donald Trump comes into office. He inherits an extremely strong economy from Barack Obama. He begins a trade war with China, which begins the escalation of prices in America. Additionally, because of the Republican doctrine of letting the free market do whatever the fuck it wants and letting billionaires do whatever they want, we are at the top of a curve of unprecedented monopolization. So there's no real there's no real competition in the market anymore because everything is basically just owned by the same 10 companies. So that is where we are entering into when COVID starts. And when COVID starts, the most profitable companies become even more profitable, but supply chains get completely fucked. And supply chains are a significant reason why prices start going up, because supply goes down and demand went up because everybody's just in their homes looking for things to buy. Additionally, he cut, I think, something like $7 billion of funding from the housing and urban development, which is directly related to the number of housing units that were able to be built during the Trump administration, which caused part of the housing shortage. Additionally, him fucking up COVID made it so that all of this private equity started buying up single-family homes so they could turn us all into fucking renters. They were able to do that because interest rates were at essentially zero and borrowing money was free. So now there's fewer homes being built. There's fewer homes available because private equity is buying it up. Supply chain is completely fucked, so prices are going up. Monopolization has made it so that greedflation is possible, where all these companies are just raising prices for no fucking reason. And so there you go. That completely explains the cost of living crisis being started by Donald Trump and Republicans. Enjoy, everybody. Tyler Gargas says, Dems will do the CHIPS Act and say it's just as important as a $25 minimum age, Medicare for all, etc. Democrats have not said that the CHIPS Act is as important as $25 minimum wage, Medicare for all, etc. Tyler Gargas, I don't know what you're talking about. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Tom says, did you accept Pete Hegseth's signal request? No, thank you. Bake Boss says, but you won't mention the Fauci flu created on purpose to get Biden into office. So that is an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked, because first of all, it's not a question. I don't have a problem if you have a different opinion than me, but just actually ask the question, be part of the conversation. Tyler Gargas says, have you considered running for Congress? I have, but I don't think it works on my schedule. I'm a touring stand-up comedian. Let's see here. Tyler Hutton says, so all things wrong now is Biden's fault? Nice logic. No, I didn't say that. Who said that? Tucker Cassidy says, what you say to RFK Jr. pushing unpasteurized milk and removing inspections of dairy products? I say, good luck buying milk, everybody. I hope you enjoy spending a bunch of time on the toilet. Joe Wee says, is a $30 minimum wage federally possible? It absolutely is. Craig R. says inflation is at 2.4%. It was when Biden left office, but it is not going to be for long because of the stupid fucking trade war that Trump has started. Let's see here. Tyler Garga says, who do you think will fill Trump's vacuum after he is done? My guess is that it's going to be one of the Trump kids, because I don't really see any of the mainstream Republicans having the kind of sway that he does. The only guy that I think could potentially be an issue is Josh Hawley. He is doing a lot of work trying to build up a resume of somebody who is an economic populist, but he's a liar and he's completely full of shit. Southern Nana says there's nothing wrong with raw milk. Well, if you think that, then go ahead and drink that, but good fucking luck. Uberlar says, Jim says inflation was 5.5 under Trump. It actually got up to 9% under Trump, but because of the Inflation Reduction Act, he was able to get it back down to 2.4%. So thank you very much, Bidenomics, for doing that. Uberlar says, why doesn't the Democrats inform more about what they do and get done? So they do try, Uberlar, but the problem is that the media environment is structured in a way to make it so that Democrats don't get heard. All of the mainstream media outlets are owned by billionaires, and billionaires are incentivized to try to get Republicans elected because Democrats hurt their bottom line. And social media companies are owned by billionaires, and so they are incentivized to push narratives that hurt the Democratic Party because Democrats hurt their bottom line. The Democratic Party is the only party that is interested in having any sort of regulation around social media, and that is going to make Mark Zuckerberg less rich, and so he does not want that to happen. Additionally, social media algorithms are really easy to manipulate if you have a lot of money and influence, which the billionaire class has. And so, they just continue doing that. It doesn't matter what Democrats do or say. They could have the most perfect messaging on the planet. The social media and media information spheres are going to put forward narratives that either twist what they say into something negative, or they're just going to make up lies about what they say and turn it into something negative. Let's see here. Scrolling down the bottom, Leeds 60 says, does Congress even pass laws anymore, or is it all presidential now? So it is difficult to get things passed in Congress because of the filibuster and because of polarization generally, but that is still the governing body that passes laws. What Trump is doing is signing executive orders, which are sort of like legally dubious depending on how far their overreach is. The executive order on birthright citizenship, for example, is blatantly unconstitutional, and in a normal judiciary, it would be struck down immediately, but we do not have a normal judiciary because 6 of these Supreme Court judges are far-right extremists. So we just have to kind of wait and see if they're going to uphold the law or just do whatever the fuck they want. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom. Let's see here. Tyler Hutton. This dude literally just said MSM doesn't want Democrats to win. 90% media is Dem biased. That is inaccurate, Tyler Hutton. And I can understand why you might think that, because that is one of the propaganda narratives that billionaires put forward. But the fact of the matter is that all mainstream media, except for progressive media channels, they weight their information in favor of the Republican Party because they need to seem as they are unbiased, so they sort of like filter, they sort of like water down and normalize the things the Republican Party does. Progressive media is the only media that actually treats the Republican Party the way that it should be, as a bunch of extremists who are hurting everybody except for the billionaire class. All right, let's see here. Savannah, good to see you. If I have more typos on my comments, will you read them? DJ Main says, childcare costs as much as rent. I have no clue what to do. My girlfriend can't work right now. I feel really bad for you, DJ D Main. I'm so sorry. I don't know where you live. I hope maybe there's some state-run programs that can help assist you. But yeah, as far as like national childcare is concerned, the Republican Party doesn't fucking give a shit if you can't afford childcare. They only care about billionaires. And so, yeah, their official policy on you being able to afford childcare is go fucking die. We don't really care. Maybe you should get a 3rd or 4th job, is what they're going to say. Let's see here. Snooki says, not every Republican is an extremist, but MAGA is absurd. So, Snooki, yes, not every Republican voter is an extremist, but every Republican who is currently in office, who is elected in office, is a member of the extreme right-wing coalition. And they are that way by design. The Trump administration has been purging all of the normal Republicans since his first administration. And now, you had people like Adam Kinzinger and, John McCain have been replaced with Marjorie Taylor Greene's and Lauren Boebert's. And so, yeah, they are an extremist party at this point. But again, not every Republican voter is like that. I believe we should have empathy and try to reach some sort of agreement with Republican voters. But as far as the political parties are concerned, I think there's absolutely no question that the Democratic Party is better and the Republican Party is worse. Let's see here. Uperlar says Dems need to adjust and find a way to get the message out. There are super rich Dems. That is accurate, Uperlar, but there are more billionaires who are helping the Republicans get their message out than there are billionaires helping the Democrats get their message out, and the billionaires that are helping the Republicans have more money. So, Vladimir Putin, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Donald Trump, like all of their money together is more than the liberal billionaires have an ability to fight against. So the only advantage that the Democratic Party has is number of people. There are more people out there that believe in this than don't. And so the only weapon that the Democratic Party has that they can use is us, is people like you and me. So if we do the work of spreading this message, then we win. But if we just sit around and wait for someone to save us, then we lose and we get fucked even harder, and America becomes more like Russia and Hungary, etc. Let's see here. Tyler Hutton says Kamala had far more billionaires donate to her campaign. That is inaccurate, Tyler Hutton. Are you a real person, or are you just here to spread misinformation? Because if you're just here to spread misinformation, I'm going to block you. If you don't ask a question, I'm going to block you. Because what you're saying is a propaganda narrative that was put forward to make it seem like Kamala Harris was the candidate of the billionaire class, but it's completely inaccurate. If you look at the data, 75% of all billionaire donations went to Republican candidates in 2024. And it makes sense that they would, because the Republican Party's platform is a giveaway to the billionaire class. So even if you think Kamala had more billionaire donors, it doesn't matter. The Republican Party is the party of the billionaire class, because they are the party that believes in cutting taxes for the billionaires while raising taxes on the rest of us, and cutting regulations for all their businesses so they can make money, even though they are poisoning us by putting toxic waste into our water and into our air, and they're gutting like the FDA, so now we can't afford to screen our milk for harmful bacterias and shit like that, So, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, man. It does not make any sense what you're saying as far as billionaires are concerned. And again, if I see one more thing from you that is not a question, you're out of here. Yeah, baby, good to see you again over on Twitch. Do you think we will get any good revolutionary music during this administration? Oh, I don't know. Maybe. That's one, that's that quote from The Third Man, about how Vienna had 100 years of peace, and all we got was the cuckoo clock or some shit like that. I forget the exact quote, but you see my meaning. Tyro Pillar says, could you explain eugenics? Yeah, eugenics is basically the belief that some people's genes are superior and we should just let everybody else die. And there are varying degrees of extremism surrounding that ideology. So it goes all the way from we should just let them die by not helping them, versus, and it goes all the way down to let's just straight up murder them right now. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Sean Sadat says inflation was good for the billionaires, so who funds them more? Who funds the billionaires? I have no idea what you're talking about there. Eddie says, how do you feel about that Trump signs executive orders on teaching AI in K through 12 schools? First of all, I haven't read that yet, so I don't know all that much about it, but as with everything that Trump does, it is stupid and not well researched and doesn't have a plan to be implemented logistically. Chris says, Jarrett, do you believe Ukraine will agree to awful Trump's so-called peace plan? I do not. I think that Zelensky has made it clear that they would much rather fight guerrilla war style than just give up 50% of their country for exactly zero security guarantees. What are they going to do? They're going to give Russia 20% of their land, and they're going to give up on trying to reclaim Crimea, and in exchange, they can just be, abandoned by America in 5 months when Russia decides to start fighting them again? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Tony says, Trump is bringing back American manufacturing. No, he's not, and also that is not a question, so you're out of here. Craig R. 1951 says, who gave away Crimea? Nobody gave away Crimea. Russia took Crimea. It happened during the Obama administration, but I don't know what point you're trying to make there, my man. Ukraine was not part of NATO, so we were under no contractual obligation to go to war in order to give Crimea back to Ukraine. And it wasn't the sort of situation that we have now where we could just start sending them money and weapons because it was over like that. They took Crimea, you know? It was just gone. Let's see here. Braz Blue says, can the president pardon contempt charges from the Supreme Court? I don't know. I think it's different if it's a state court versus if it's a federal court. So yeah, sorry, I'm gonna have to look into that one because I don't know if these would be state charges or federal charges. If it's state charges, then no. If it's federal charges, then yes. All right. Craig R. says, so Obama didn't do anything about Crimea. That was okay. I already explained that, Craig. You were just trolling at this point. DJ D. Main says, what was this executive order signed about being able to discipline in schools? I actually haven't read that one yet. Sean Sadat says he's got companies lined up to start manufacturing in the U.S. already. That is inaccurate, Sean Sadat. Leeds60 says, do you think the Trump administration is going to successfully gag the press? You know, I was worried about that at the start of his administration because there were so many news organizations that were just rolling over immediately. But since there has started to be some pushback from the media, I'm starting to think that maybe he will not be able to. But we need to keep up that momentum, otherwise he will be able to just sort of like run ramshod over everybody. There is still good reporting out there. Once that goes away, then I'll be concerned about if the Trump administration is successfully gagging the press. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Sean Sadat says, this is a liberal party, I see. All right, you're out of here. You did not ask your question. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but just ask a question, be part of the conversation. Jared Harbison says, fire everyone in politics and start new. I do not believe that would be the best way of going about it. Why don't we primary the people that we don't like who are currently in office? Why don't we vote out the people that we don't like that are currently in office? Kristi Nyoskavetsky, good to see you again. Your thoughts on Trump administrations to accept the Crimean Peninsula as Russian territory? So ever since the Trump administration started taking over the negotiations for peace between Russia and Ukraine, his starting position has been just give Russia whatever the fuck they want and to not give Ukraine anything. It is a bad deal that is trying to just give Ukraine to Russia. I think that Ukraine should stand up for themselves and tell Trump absolutely fucking not. But yeah, you know, I have been saying this for fucking years now, that with Trump in charge, Ukraine would just be given to Russia. Right. Colin says, does abortion in the U.S. have an intertwined history with eugenics? I know that is a talking point on the right, but I do not believe that it is accurate in the slightest. What I will say, though, is that trying to make abortion illegal does have a direct connection to trying to keep marginalized communities poor and desperate. Because if Republicans really cared about stopping abortions, the first thing they would do is try to curb accidental pregnancies by making birth control widely available, prophylactic, sex education, family planning, and making it possible for people to actually raise the children that they have. That would be raising the minimum wage, free or supplemented childcare, free universal pre-K, things like that. But Republicans are firmly against all of those policies. So if you take all of that math and you add it together, what it equals is Republicans don't actually give a shit about stopping abortion. What they want is to increase accidental pregnancies and then force people who can't afford to have those kids to keep those kids so that they will continue to be desperate and poor and working 1,000 jobs, 1,000 hours a week in dangerous conditions for employers who are demeaning them and harassing them and potentially abusing them. And then they will have nothing to do. They will have no recourse in that battle, and they will not be able to have the time, energy, or money to organize or vote or go to college or any of that good shit. So yeah, there you go. Scrolling down to the bottom. Jared B. Harrison, guy makes up shit. That is not a question, and you are out of here. Okay. Lisa Poole, you know what my opinion is on Tim Pool. Lisa Poole, you've been here before. What's your opinion on Tim Pool? That's my question. User a bunch of numbers says Democrats need to focus on their own party, not Trump. If not, they will continue to lose. That is not accurate. User a whole bunch of numbers. Also, you spelled "their" wrong. The Democratic Party is doing what they can, but they are fighting a game that has been rigged against them. The electoral system in this country is rigged against them with gerrymandering the Senate map in the Electoral College. The media environment is rigged against them, where centrist media waters down the Republican Party to make it seem like they are an extremist. Social media is weighted against the Democratic Party because billionaires own them, so they flood it with narratives that are designed to either get people to vote for Republicans or just to not vote at all. So yeah, no matter what they do, no matter what their messaging strategy is, it will either be twisted into something negative or they'll just make shit up about them. There are plenty of lies out there about the Democratic Party. Too many, too bad away in any one person's lifetime. So the only thing that we can do to fight that is for each individual citizen to be a voice for the Democratic Party. Because again, they can't win this by themselves. The billionaire class has too much money and power to throw at the problem. Read the book Dark Money. It is illuminating and extremely infuriating. But that is the entire game plan there, guys, for the billionaires to convince us that the Democratic Party is feckless and ineffective and just as bad as Republicans, and both parties are the same, and every politician is exactly as shitty and corrupt and lie-y as the next politician. But there are differences in the parties. There are differences in the politicians. And again, the only way the Democrats can win this is if we help them, if we do the work. All right, scrolling down to the bottom, says Greggy Poo says, so we don't want to use our tax dollars to pay for college, but use it for birthing kids. Yeah, Greggy Poo, isn't that interesting? It almost seems like the Trump administration just wants people to have kids they can't afford. Colden says, I love Trump, but besides that, who are you voting for in 2028? That is not a question, and so you are out of here. Okay, scrolling down the bottom. Can Trump become a dictator? He can, because the Republicans in Congress have exactly zero backbone and moral fiber. So they will allow that to happen. The extremist right-wing Supreme Court could potentially allow that to happen. We're waiting to see. That's an open question still. The only thing that can stop him is us, is people like you and me, because we have power collectively. We can boycott, protest, we can strike, voting, putting political pressure on elected representatives. It is within our power to stop Trump from being a dictator, but he 100% can be, because the Republicans are not strong enough or willing to stand up to him. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Lead60 says, do you think Hegseth is going to get fired? You know, I thought maybe he would based on the second Signalgate scandal, but just based on the way that Trump is talking right now, I think it's probably likely that he wants to see if he can get away with keeping him on. But yeah, I try not to do predictions on this show. So yeah, I'm just going to say I don't know. And I think that it is incumbent upon all of us to call up our elected representatives and demand that Hegseth resign, because he is a fucking national security nightmare. Chris says, can he become a dictator? He is already. No, he is not already. We still have power. Congress still has power. The judiciary still has power. And so, yeah, you know, the more work that you and I do, the less likely it is that Trump actually becomes a full-fledged dictator. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Ooh, what a nice thing to say, Sassy Siren Sarah. Chris says, why in America do presidents put their own judges and mostly backing them in court? So the way that it's supposed to work is that the president nominates judges, but they have to be confirmed by Congress. Now, the way that it used to work before we were living in a polarized electorate, in which the Republican Party has weaponized every aspect of government instead of actually just doing the work of being a governing body, the Republican Party has said we're not going to forward the nomination of any judge nominated by any Democrat ever, even if it is the most milquetoast centrist person on the planet. I will refer you to Merrick Garland as evidence of that. Thank you for my cap. I appreciate that. So yeah, ideally in a situation where there's checks and balances and shared political power, the president gets to nominate somebody, but a sober and sincere Congress is the one that actually gets to say, okay, well, that person does get to be a judge. Now, the way that it works now is that if Republicans have the Senate, which they do, and Republicans have the White House, which they do, then they can nominate and seat any fucking whack job that they want. And that is exactly what happened during the first Trump administration. Yeah, baby. Says, did you hear about the DNC vice president trying to push ineffective Dems out next election? Thoughts? I don't believe that it is productive for the Democratic Party to wage war against itself. That being said, I do like what the DNC vice president is doing. I don't care that he's taking shots at James Carville because James Carville is not in the Democratic Party anymore. He's just a talking head on the news. But yeah, it is the job of, sorry, I gotta start that sentence again. David Hogue was able to get that position, and David Hogue is now doing the things that he thinks would be beneficial for the DNC to win elections going forward. I personally am more aligned with the younger, more progressive wing of the Democratic Party as opposed to the centrist gerontocracy wing of the Democratic Party. So I think that this is all fucking fair game, but I also don't think that it's a fucking problem. We are helping primary challengers, meaning that we are giving people more options. And we are saying, let the voters decide. Do you want somebody who's a little bit more centrist, or do you want someone who's a little more progressive? That seems to be a completely okay thing to me. And the Democratic Party has been putting their finger on the scale for a while for the centrist candidates. So I think it's only right that we sort of even the playing field a little bit. So yeah, I like David Hogue. I think he's doing good work. DJ Main says, do you think Bernie actually had a chance in 2028, or is he paving the way for someone else? I like Bernie Sanders a lot. I was an original Bernie fan back in 2015. He is extremely old, though, and I think it would be irresponsible for somebody Bernie's age, even though he still has gas in the tank. You can tell just by watching him in interviews. I think it would be irresponsible for somebody his age to run for president, considering that the thing that everybody hated the most about Joe Biden was how old he was, So, yeah, there we go. Drywall says, aligned with the woke people. Yes, and proudly so. Badger75 says, I think impeachment is a toothless tiger because of partisan politicians. I don't. So this all... It relates to my greater point that you get the government that you vote for. If you vote for people who put party over country and are not willing to impeach a president like Trump, who has done so many things that merit impeachment, is not even fucking funny, then you do get an impeachment process that is completely toothless. But, if we had sane people in the Republican Party still, like Adam Kinzinger and Jeff Flake and, fucking John McCain, then, it would be possible to, remove a president through impeachment. But as it stands, the Republican Party is just, a wing of the MAGA party. And so they're not doing their job of actually governing. They're not doing their job of standing up to the president and, using the power that has been bestowed upon them by the Constitution. Let's see here. Chris says, do you think Trump will manage to run for a third term? I do, but whether or not he is able to serve in that third term is an open question. Whether or not the Democrats are able to run the table in the midterms, if the Republican Congress will let him get away with a third term, if the Supreme Court will let him get away with a third term, if he just tries to declare martial law and cancel all elections. I don't know what mechanism he will use to try to stay in office until he dies, but he does want to stay in office until he dies, and so that should be concerning to every single one of us, whether you are left, right, or center. It's the Rocketeer says, I'm a little bit centrist, well, I'm a little bit rock and roll. Cool. All right, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. Christy Hona says, who's the best choice to run for president from the Democratic Party? I don't wish cast for the 2028 election. I'm trying to get people focused on the 2026 election. 2026, guys, that's what we should be focused on. Democrats need to run the table in 2026. That is our number one priority. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. James Araguin says, I hope he does. You hope he does what? Lead 60 says, do you think the younger generation is going to wake up and participate in our national politics? I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen automatically because, as generations are, coming into adulthood, we are seeing children that have been, bred on social media. And social media, as I have mentioned time and time again, is a tool of the billionaire class to incept us with any narrative that we will believe that will either make us vote for Republicans or not vote at all. And that is why you see so many Gen Z men going the Joe Rogan route of being Republicans, because they believe that that is how they can be masculine men and, insert your bullshit narrative here. So yeah, if we do the work of rescuing these kids from social media, if we do the work of teaching them why politics is important and how their vote has a direct relation to how easy or hard their life is going to be, then we will have an activated younger generation. All right, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. Rudy Dalton says, I saw you last night in Des Moines, Iowa. Oh, great. Well, I hope you liked it, Rudy. That reminds me of that old Mitch Hedberg joke. Where he said, somebody came up to me in the airport and said, I saw your show last night, but he didn't say whether he liked it or not. So I just turned around, I looked back at him, and I said, I just saw you at the airport. All right. Dylan says, why does communism always fail? There has never been a communist country. So any country that calls itself communist is actually a dictatorship. The North Korea calls itself a democratic country, but it's decidedly not a democratic country. Just because they call themselves communist doesn't mean they are communist. So yeah, not every communist country fails because we've never had a communist country, so we don't fucking know. Alda says, watch him tell everybody to write him in on the ballot. I would never do that. DJ Main, Twitter has become the most disgusting place. Completely agree with that. Rena, great to see you. Chris says, thanks, Jared, for answering my question. You're welcome. All this said, I think he's going to wait until he has a plan for who's going to take over and how to rig after. Oh, that's who. Yeah. Potentially, yeah. I wouldn't say, I would not say, that is I wouldn't put it past him, should we say. Colin says, wasn't the USSR a communist country? What is defined as a communist country? Great question, Colin. So what is communism? That is the main question. If you read the Communist Manifesto, it is clear. Communism is the working class owning the means of production. And there has never been a country that has subscribed to that attitude. The USSR, Cuba, China, all of them have called themselves communist, but have been, in essence, dictatorships. If you want actual examples of communism working, look at the Publix grocery store, which is an employee-owned grocery store. Any employee-owned business is an example of communism, but the USSR, Cuba, China, none of them are actually communist because the workers don't own the means of production. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom. Chris says, what do you think about the Unfuck America tour? I don't know anything about it, but it seems pretty cool to me, just based on what little I have heard about it. All right, scrolling down to the bottom, says Drywall, says, look how excited he gets when talking about communism. I don't know what your point is, Drywall, but if you don't ask a question, you will get booted out of here. Dip Bean Tot says, because there is no way to actually do it. Well, there are tons of employee-owned companies here in America, and they seem to be doing great, so I have no idea what you're fucking talking about. Green Bay, yeah, the Green Bay Packers, everybody. Yeah, they're a bunch of commies. Thank you, Scott. Dylan says, because Marx advocated for a temporary dictatorship. What dictator would give up all power? I do not know that that is accurate, what you just said there, Dylan. But here's the thing, and this is what I think is the most important, is that communism does not mean the same thing to every person. If you're somebody who wants the billionaire class to win and wants the Republican Party to do great so that the billionaire class can get their tax cuts and they can cut regulations so the billionaires can flood our water with poison and our air with poison and shit like that, then you will find something in the history of Marxism or in the Communist Manifesto that you think is evidence that communism is bad. And you'll look at things like Venezuela and you'll say, look, socialism is bad. And you look at the USSR and you'll say, look, communism is bad. But the fact is, that is not what communism is. It is literally just cherry-picking information to forward your agenda and your narrative. If you want to have a conversation about employee benefits, about helping the working class, about taxing the rich. Like, I'm down for that. But if you just want to have a semantic argument about what is communism and what does that mean and are these countries communist or not, I find that to be completely uninteresting. I find it to be just another fucking political football that the right tries to use to demonize anything that threatens the billionaire's powers. All right, Luna Love BMW says, didn't know there is politics on Twitch. Hell yeah. I mean, there is over here, you know, and I think Hassan and Destiny are on Twitch, so yeah, there's definitely politics on there. Welcome to the party, Luna. All right, scrolling down here to the bottom. DJ D Main says, anti-communist propaganda has been hard at work since the early 1900s. Completely agree with that. Let's see here. Scrolling down to the bottom. Badge75 says, do you feel sorry for Elon? Do I feel sorry for a Nepo baby who inherited his fortune, has stolen or been given everything that he's ever achieved, and is systematically dismantling our government for his own profit and enjoyment? No. That dude deserves every fucking thing that he gets. James Araguen says, both parties are working together to conquer and divide us all. We are still asleep. It is us versus them. You're half right, James. There is a difference between the two political parties, but it is the goal of the billionaire class to get us, the voters, to fight amongst ourselves. The Republican voters are not the enemy. The Republican politicians are the enemy. But the Democratic politicians are not working with the Republican politicians to get us to fight. The Democratic politicians are doing their fucking best, man. Look at the Biden administration. Look at all the great things that happened during the Biden administration. That is not them just being like the Republicans, but you know, just a different shade of the same thing. They do different things. They appoint different things to the agencies. The head of the EPA during the Biden administration was actually trying to protect the environment. The head of the EPA during the Trump administration are people that are actively trying to destroy the environment. They're fucking coal and oil magnates. The head of the NLRB during the Biden administration was strengthening unions. That is not the case during the Trump administration, you know. So yeah, you know, where you are correct is that the voters, the 99%, we are not the enemy. If you're a Republican, the Democratic Party voters, immigrants, trans kids, poor people, that is not your enemy. If you're a Democrat, the Republican voters are not your enemy, and centrist Democrats are not your enemy, and progressive Democrats are not your enemy. The enemy is exactly two groups. It is the billionaire class and the Republican Party that is working hand in hand with them to become the new aristocracy, to become the new head of the world, where the rest of us are all fucking serf wage slaves who we have to drink their fucking poison runoff from their factories and fucking like it. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom here. Let's see here. Drywall says, what should the corporate tax rate be? More. Drywall, more than it is right now. Alrighty. Let's see here. James Araguen. Oh, so only Democrats are innocent. Yeah, right. Not every Democrat is innocent, and not every Democratic politician is innocent, but more Democratic politicians are innocent than Republican politicians, James. Also, that's not a question, so you are out of here. Congratulations. I don't put up with snark, everybody. If you want to be part of the conversation, be part of the conversation. Leeds60 says, how far away from being an oligarchy do you think we are at this point? I think we're currently an oligarchy, but that does not mean that we do not have the power anymore. We are not in a Russia-style dictatorship yet where people are afraid to speak their mind, you know? God, what the hell was that guy who was the Putin critic who just recently died? Was it Magnitsky? I forget. But he had to leave Russia because of all the things that he was saying negative about the Putin regime. And then when he went back, he was immediately arrested and sent to a gulag in Siberia where he was beaten to death. That is not happening currently in America, but we're close. You know, like they are already talking about shipping off American citizens to a concentration camp in El Salvador. There are people who are legal residents who have done nothing wrong who have already been shipped off to the concentration camp in El Salvador. But people like me are still speaking our minds. You know, like, do we have a target on our back? Maybe. I don't know. But Rachel Maddow's not in jail right now, so we're probably not a full dictatorship yet. But an oligarchy, 100%. Absolutely. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom, says Drywall says, this guy's mommy definitely pays his rent. No, your mom pays my rent. Alright, Drywall, I've had it with you, you're out of here. All right, the birth certificate propaganda against Obama is shameful, by the way. Completely agree with that. Colin says, how do we know politicians would use tax money for the people and not for corruption? Well, Colin, we need to use things like checks and balances for that. We have systems in place, or at least we did before Trump came into office, in order to check and double check the actions of the government. Spending by the government is mandated by Congress, and Congress is like over 500 people. And so the idea is that if you spread power around amongst a whole bunch of people and everybody's kind of looking over each other's shoulder and making sure that everybody's on the level, then you don't have things like massive widespread corruption. The problem is that the Trump administration is ignoring all those checks and balances. It is trying to consolidate power, eliminate anybody who is not a Trump loyalist from the government. They're firing inspectors general, which are the people who make sure that the government does what it's supposed to be doing, in order to basically raid the coffers, basically take all of our tax dollars and put them into his pocket. And there are tons of examples of this happening already. Every time Trump goes golfing in Mar-a-Lago, he charges Secret Service 3 times the normal rate for their rooms, which is literally stealing our taxpayer dollars and putting it directly into his pocket. Thank you for your question, though, Colin. I appreciate you. Uperlar says, why do you think that the billionaires are the only ones who can rule social media and thoughts? Because social media is really easy to manipulate when you have a lot of money and power. It is, if you know what to look for, you see it time and time again. During the Andrew Tate trial, when he first got arrested, my feeds were suddenly filled with pro-Andrew Tate, videos and videos of him like doing fucking kickboxing and him being like a, like a self-help guru instead of being a fucking misogynist rapist who is also guilty of sex trafficking. During the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, my feed is like all comedy and politics, but for some reason I started getting a ton of videos that were just straight video of the trial that were making Amber Heard look like a crazy person. That is not a fucking coincidence. So the billionaire class is able to use their money to influence the algorithm and push specific narratives, push specific videos that hurt the Democratic Party and help the Republican Party. And if you read Dark Money, you see that this is something that they have been doing for a very, very long time. Even before social media, they have been throwing these narratives out there in order to affect political outcomes that are beneficial to them. So again, I'm going to say everybody should read Dark Money. It will infuriate you. Whack FCC says, how about people sent to Rwanda? Trump, well, it wasn't El Salvador. I'm not really sure what you are referring to, Whack FCC, so sorry. Let's see here. Joseph Martinez makes the excellent point that must change X algorithm to promote his tweets to the top. DJ Main says, what's your stance on Israel? So Israel, I try to be very specific when I talk about Israel because the problem with Israel is not Israel the country, it is the leadership. It is the Netanyahu government, which is an extremely right-wing government that does not give a shit about the lives, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of the citizens of Palestine. It is the goal of the far-right government of Israel to ethnically cleanse Palestine and make that all Israel and completely take that over for the people that live there. Now, I don't think that all of Israel is down with that the same way that not all of America is down with Donald Trump and what the Republican Party is doing. But, through things like voter suppression and disenfranchisement and disengagement, you see far-right ideologues winning elections. So I don't blame the people of Israel for that. The same way that I don't blame the people of Palestine for the actions of Hamas. I am for the citizens of both of those countries, and I am against the governing bodies of both of those countries. Richard Bruton says, can I get you a tissue? No, but you should get your mom one because she's got her cum all over, my cum all over her face. All right, scrolling down to the bottom, says, thank you, have to go. Thank you for being here, Whack FCC. Let's see here. Free Palestine, glad you made sure to differentiate that. You're welcome. Let's see here, thank you. Manderific, I appreciate that. Let's see here. Lead 60 says, do you think that Israel will ever face consequences over Gaza? Yes, if we vote for politicians who are willing to stand up to the Netanyahu government. Uberlar says, I'm going to read Dark Bunny. Well, read it in a rage room. Make sure that you can fucking take a fucking car apart with your bare hands. It'll make you so fucking pissed. Thank you for the laugh, Muzz King. I appreciate that. Microplastic says, that's a nonsense Zionist stance. I don't know if I agree with that. Hey everybody, my live got flagged for bullying because I told that dude that his mom needed a tissue to wipe my cum off of her face. So I'm gonna get out of here. I gotta take a shower anyways. And now I'm in trouble. I got a little ahead of myself. Sometimes I think of burns that are just too good, everybody. All right, let's see here. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for all of the comments and likes and the gifts and the follows and the subscribes. You can be a subscriber. You can join my Patreon. Go to my website, jarrettberenstein.com. I'm on the road right now, so my streaming schedule is very sporadic, but I will pop in here time and time again to do the good work of spreading these narratives. But I need you guys to help me. I can't do this all by myself. We need people to be activated and engaged. We need people to be having conversations with their friends and family and neighbors and coworkers so that we can counteract the propaganda that the billionaires are spreading via social media and mainstream media. We have to do that work. There is not an organization on the planet that is able to stand up against the billionaire class. They just have too much. They just have too much. The only thing they don't have is human bodies to do the work. That's what we have. But you got to help me, guys. We all have to do the work. And if we all do the work, then nobody has to do a lot of work. So let's all do it together, okay? And if you ever have any questions about how to do the work or what the work is, shoot me a DM. My DMs are open. You can email me through my website. All of that is a great way to get in touch. I'm usually very good about responding to comments and shit like that. So, yeah, what a time to have not had my headphones in. Sorry, it's the Rocketeer. I apologize. I just love these guys who think they're going to fucking come at a professional stand-up comedian. Like, what do you think you're going to accomplish here in the comment section, my man? All right, have a great... Oh, hello, my love, Kirsten. Thank you for being here. I will see you guys when I see you next. Take care. And, yes, be good and safe, all of you. All right, bye-bye, 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 goodbye, 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 goodbye.